Hey guys, what's up? Ron Parks here and welcome back to the channel. I want to take a little time today to talk about buying versus leasing a car. So if you're in the market for a new car, should you buy it or should you lease it? Well, buying or leasing has always been a difficult decision, as buying involves higher monthly payments, but at the end you own the car. Now leasing has lower monthly payments, but you can get stuck into a cycle where at the end of every lease, you don't own a car, you have to turn it in, and you have to lease a new one. So it's a forward-looking spiral of leasing, 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 leasing. Leasing has lower monthly payments, but you can get into a cycle where you never stop paying for a vehicle. As soon as the lease is over, you just go back and lease another one. Now, more people are choosing a lease over a car loan, and the trend seems to be continuing. So before we go through a real-life example, let's talk about the pros and cons of buying versus leasing. So here are the differences between buying and leasing. When you buy a car, at the end of the loan, you own it. You've made all the payments to pay off the car loan. With a lease, you don't own the vehicle. You're just renting it. And the way it's calculated, which we'll go through in the example, is that you're paying essentially the depreciation for the 3 years that you are using the car. As it relates to buying, there's some upfront costs, which include, the cash payment or the down payment, taxes, registration, and other fees. And they can include the first month's payment, a non-refundable security deposit, an acquisition fee, and sometimes a down payment. When you buy a car, the monthly payments are higher, as you pay for the full cost of the vehicle. On a lease, payments are lower, as you pay for the depreciated value of the vehicle, plus interest. Usually, after 3 years, cars depreciate between 50 and 60% of the purchase price. So if a car costs $30,000, then you're only really paying on $15,000 to $18,000. That's 50 to 60% of the value of the car. When you own a car, you can sell it or trade in your vehicle at any time. But on the lease, if you end the lease early, you need to pay all the remaining future monthly payments until the lease end. And this could be a very high amount. And that's one of the reasons why people usually do not break their leases and get out early. When you buy the car, you have equity in it, which means there's some future value. So the vehicle will depreciate, but you have value at the end of your loan payments. And on a lease, the future value doesn't really affect you financially, as you have no equity in the deal. At the end of the lease, you typically will turn the car in, except there are usually set purchase prices in a lease where you can go out and buy the car at the end of the lease. Let's go through a real-life example to see how the two compare as to cost and what is usually a better way to go. So now that I've gone through some of the pros and cons on buying a car versus leasing a car, let's do a real-life example. And let's set up some assumptions, some really simple assumptions, where we have the purchase price of the car is equal to $17,000, your deposit will be $2,000, your interest rate will be 4.22%, which is very common of what you can get now for buying or leasing a car, and we'll also have the term to be 36 months, and we'll have a value of the car at the end of the 3 years of $12,000. These are the only numbers you actually need to be able to calculate what is better, to buy or to lease. I should also give you the monthly payments. So on the buy side, the monthly payments is $444 a month. And on the lease side, the monthly payments are $143. It's really important to realize that the reason why this $143 is as low as it is that you're not paying for the entire $17,000 of a car. You're only paying for the depreciation or the rental value of the car from day one to the end of 3 years. And you only pay for the depreciation, which means after 3 years, most cars depreciate between 40 to 50%. So if we take a 50% depreciation, the value of the car that you're actually paying on is not $17,000, but it's really $8,500. So let's quickly go through both calculations, either buy or lease. So again, purchase price, $17,000, a deposit of $2,000. You can decide whatever deposit you want to make. And also the purchase price, either buying a car or leasing a car, is all negotiable with the dealer. And that gives us a net amount of $15,000 for each. On the buy side, this $15,000 you get a loan for. On the lease side, you're going to make lease payments based upon the depreciated value, which in this case will be around $8,500. And you'll see that the loan for buying the car is going to be $444 a month, as I mentioned, but it's only going to be $143 a month for the lease. So it's pretty much multiplication. We have 36 months, and the cost of 36 months at $444 is $15,984. And the cost at $143 on the lease times 36 months is $5,180. And in this example, let's just assume that if you hold the lease, you'll buy the car from the leasing company at the end, which will make apples and apples. So if you're going to buy the car, on the buy side, you really don't need to pay any money because you've already paid for the entire value of the car. And on the lease side, you'll have to spend $12,000 to get the car back. And also, we also have the deposit we have to add back, which was $2,000 on both. So to buy the car, your total costs are $17,984. Excuse me. And on the lease, the total car is going to be $19,180. And the difference between the two is $1,146. So in this scenario, it actually makes sense to buy the car because your total costs of ownership will be $17,984 versus to lease the car, $19,180. So you can use this kind of example for any buy or lease. The only thing you have to be careful about is to make sure you understand what the value of the car is at the end of the lease. And you can go to Kelley Blue Book or the leasing company, based upon the model car, will tell you how much the residual value is. Now, the residual value is also just equal to the value of the estimated price at the end of the lease. And now we have the same scenario. Now remember, the scenario is that if you have a lease, you're going to buy the car out. But let's say that you don't want to buy the car. And at the end of your loan, you want to sell the car. Okay, so that will make it apples and apples on that example. And as we do a buy versus a lease, again, we have $17,000 purchase price, and we have a $2,000 deposit, and that gives us $15,000. And we have $444 a month versus $143 a month. And so we have a cost of $444 times 36 months, which is $15,984. Add back the deposit. And that means your total cost, in this case, to buy the car, has been $17,984. On the lease side, your total payments of $143 times 36 months is $5,180.
and you still have a $2,000 deposit, and that leaves $7,180. Now remember, we said that we're going to not buy the car on the lease side, and we're going to sell the car if you get a loan for it. So selling the car, you'll recognize $12,000, which will give us $5,984, which is the net cost on buying, and $7,180 on the lease, and the difference between the two is $1,196. And again, even if you turn the car back and sell your car, you're ahead by buying it versus leasing it. So these numbers show the difference between your lease payments, which will be much lower because you're only paying for a percentage of the car, versus a much larger amount that you pay monthly as it relates to buying the car. And one of the reasons why the lease is usually more expensive is because you have additional costs involved to lease the car. And part of that is the $143 is really broken down into rent on the car and depreciation. So at the end of the day, you sit down and make these calculations. But I'll next go through one of the reasons, or some of the reasons, why you would want to buy or you would want to lease based upon your personal circumstances.
Now that you've seen how the basic calculations show the major differences between buying and leasing, I'd like to summarize. The purchase price for a car is the same as the capitalized cost for a lease, which means it's just two different terms. And you can negotiate the lease price of your car just the same way that you negotiate the price on a car you are buying. Now, all calculations start from the lowest cost of the car, so it's to your advantage whether you're buying or leasing to negotiate the lowest price. Buying a car gives you equity at the end of the payments, which allows you to sell the car if you want to and offset some costs, or just continue keeping it since most of the depreciation has been done. Buying or leasing a car is situation specific. So let me give you an example of what I think are the 5 types of people and whether or not they should rent or they should buy. Okay, the first type is the work warrior. So if you drive 15,000 miles a year or more, it's probably better to buy. As you know, there are limits on mileage for lease cars, ranging from 10,000 to 15,000 miles. So whatever plan you take, after you run through those miles, you have to pay somewhere between 25 and 30 cents per mile. If you're using the car principally for business, then it is more advantageous to lease than to buy. If you have a business and file a Schedule C for business income and expenses, you'll be allowed to deduct the entire cost of the monthly lease in addition to any mileage deduction, which right now it's at 57.5 cents per mile. Now you can use a quick and easy way in your taxes to take the business miles, multiply it by 57.5, and that comes up with one of your deductions. But if your actual expenses are greater, for example, you had to put a whole new set of tires on, or there was damage to the car that you had to fix, it's better to use the actual expenses. Now the second personality is what I call new college student. So if you're just starting college and need transportation and you have limited funds, then a lease could be the best option. You'll have very low out-of-pocket costs to get started, and you'll have a lower monthly payment. And after 3 years, your situation would have changed and you can decide what to do. Buy it or just turn the car back. Of course, the best course is to buy an economical used car, and you'll save lots of money on the long term. And the third set of people are what I call early adopters. These are people that want to have a new car every 3 years, as well as those that like to adopt the newest technology in a car, such as Tesla electric vehicles. They don't mind taking a lease because at the end, they just want a new car. It will cost them more money, but it's a trade-off they make. Now, the fourth personality I say is someone called Crash Charlie. This is someone that doesn't usually take good care of a car, and they do keep it a long term. If you didn't take good care of your car and you were prone to accidents, leasing a car would cost you a lot more money because you have to bring the car back to the state it was at the time that you took out the lease. Now for the last one, which I call a saver. This personality is very conscious of how much they spend and won't spend or appreciate spending money on things that are not absolutely necessary. A saver might not even buy a car, but use the hourly rental services when they need a car. And this is particularly true of the city. And going back to leases, I want to highlight some of the tax ramifications. When you lease a car, you can actually maximize your tax deductions. As I mentioned before, if you use your car for business purposes, a lease will allow and often affords you more tax write-offs than a loan. That's because the IRS allows you to deduct both the depreciation and the financing costs that are part of each monthly payment. So if you're leasing a luxury automobile, the amount you can write off may be limited, but it is still much, much better than the write-off if you own the car. So let me just highlight where we've been, and these are the things you need to think about, whether you're going to buy or lease. Your monthly cash flow, if you want lower payments, you lease the car. If you want higher payments but own the car, then you have to buy it. Number two would be, do you have the available savings for a down payment and the initial fees? Because most leases have low down payments, or you can get the dealer to waive the down payment and you'll pay less for the sales tax on the lease because it comes out monthly versus all at once. Number three is, how much do you drive? Well, if you drive over 10,000 to 15,000 miles, depending on the lease agreement, you'll probably have to pay extra for each mile. Leasing companies charge anywhere from 15 to 35 cents per mile for additional mileage. But you can pay less, like 10 cents per mile, if you buy them up front when you negotiate the lease. It's sometimes hard to figure out how much you're going to need the car, but you can always drop those miles back down. Number four will be how hard you are on the car. If you're prone to getting scratches or having a lot of accidents or certain damages, a lease may not be for you because all the wear and tear will reduce the value and they'll charge you when you turn the car in. And especially if you have an accident, you'll have to fix it. Number five, if you drive the car for business, when you lease it, a portion of the car's depreciation and financing costs can be deducted on your taxes. You can also deduct interest on loans to buy a car. However, most of them have a limit on deductibility. And the IRS has a guide for how to calculate the tax deduction for a leased car. There's a lot of calculation based on your business income, what percent you use, how much the car costs, and additional expenses. And the last one, number six, is how long you plan on keeping the car and how flexible do you need to be. And this is a really, really big thought. Since you only want to drive for a few years, well, leasing is the most convenient option. However, if you pay a lot to try to get out of the lease before the term is up, as much as a year or 9 months, you will have to pay the future value of all the lease payments up to the end of the term, which is usually prohibitive. So I hope this helps and covers most of the basic aspects of thinking about buying or leasing a car. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate a nice pound on the like button for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe. And until next time, thanks.